Hello, hello, hello. What's up, everybody? Americana back here with another video. Today, we're going to be doing our typical Bitcoin, Ethereum lower time frame update. We are getting to the point within this range, whether we're looking at Bitcoin or Ethereum, that it has some implications for the broader cycle in general. So we are also going to be discussing that today. So this might be a little bit of a longer video, but do make sure you guys stick around to the end. It'll help you understand the other two videos coming out this week, kind of my more macro stance on where we could be at within the overall crypto cycle and what I'm looking for on Bitcoin and Ethereum when it comes to the lower time frame, daily, 4 hour, things like that. So let's go ahead and dive in. All right, the first thing I want to discuss, and we're going to go pretty low time frame here. I'll actually mark out, this is last Monday's daily candle, and this was very, very, very interesting to me. One, because we had what is called a Darth Maul style candle, right, where we sweep both sides and close. We didn't quite close within this candle, right? If I zoomed in here, we did close slightly above it, but depending what coin you look at, depending what exchange, it was very, very, very close. So essentially a Darth Maul candle. Now, what was really interesting to me last week is once we established, this is that same Monday range that we had here, but once we established this range, we never went above or below. We never swept this candle. And it was multiple days. It was an entire week's worth of price action where we did not sweep this candle. Okay, I can come down to the hourly time frame as well. You guys can see on here. And this is across every exchange that I look at, right? We actually did not get this sweep here, even though it was close. Bitcoin trading in this very, very compressed range. And we've had futures open, a little bit of volatility, currently dumping there. But we can go to the daily time frame and see just how long we have been closing within this candle. Now, this is not something that we typically see. All right, I'll try to pull an example here. You can see we have this candle here and here, right? Did actually get the sweep above there. We'll say, let's say, even if it didn't sweep, right, we ended up getting this sweep to come in just a few days later. So kind of pushing what I would consider an extreme of still operating within this same price range. And that does typically give us indication that a very volatile move is coming. The longer this thing stays in here, the more volatile a move could be really either direction. And we'll talk about a little bit of that direction as well in today's video. But that is kind of recapping a little bit from last week. All right, now moving to a little bit higher time frame, showing some examples on the daily. You guys don't know, right? I know people talk about liquidity sweeps. I don't know who's a trader here. I don't know who's not trading. People talk about liquidity sweeps all the time. It gets thrown around. You guys probably get the gist of what it is. But how can you actually use these liquidity sweeps to your advantage to understand potential moves out of Bitcoin? And we can go back and look at this range in November and then this February range here for what I think to be some good examples. So I'm just going to draw this, just one line in here because the point will get across, and then I'll go ahead and do this kind of bottom range in here, right? When I say liquidity was assessed, all right, all I mean is we got the liquidity sweep. Now, something you'll notice in this February range here, we get this move, we sweep that liquidity, and we sweep that liquidity again, right? We sweep it a third time, sweep it a third or a fourth time. Now, what's happening when this is going on? Obviously, people are FOMOing in. We also are building this same kind of liquidity to the downside, but without assessing it. Now, this is a pretty big indication of where Bitcoin could potentially go in the future. Now, I did not expect a dump all the way down to 60K if we did get it, but to not expect to go assess some of that liquidity would be rather ignorant in my opinion. We saw this again back in this January, February range as well. Same kind of pattern struck again. I could even extend that out, but just use your eyes there. Obviously, we have set this upper bound of the range. We sweep it, sweep, sweep, all while we're building these same liquidity levels to the downside. We end up hitting the sweep of this range low, getting us down to about $58,000. Now, this is where the important part of this lies. This is kind of establishing the framework of kind of how we think about a range. But the real important part is what reaction do you get when you do get the liquidity sweep. Now, we did not get any reaction here. But we have been getting what I would call decent reaction since June. And this is obviously all operating within the larger framework of I do think we are looking at some sort of macro bottom. We're not going to cover that in this video. I do have plenty of videos where we do discuss it. But just speaking on these current price ranges, these kind of mechanical movements that we do see from Bitcoin. All right, so currently, obviously you guys remember being back in here, but right in here with these two moves and getting a reaction out of Bitcoin, we are in a lot healthier position than we were back in this, February as we're descending down to these lows in here. All right, guys. Now, with that understanding, let's zoom in. We'll go down to the 4 hour. I do want to point out, right, some daily divergences. I talked about it last week. 3-day divergence, weekly divergence into this liquidity. So into this liquidity sweep. So really positive action to see that. But I really want to dial in on this June range. And you guys bear with me, okay? I'm obviously got a new setup recording here today and trying to get things a little bit cleaner, but it means I'm operating on a little bit of a smaller screen. So do bear with me, and the shades make it a little bit hard, but I think they look good and I feel more comfortable. So anyways, now let's take this same line of thinking and talk about this recent range that we've had. Okay, what are we seeing? Liquidity sweep. I'm going to ignore this for a second, guys, if you excuse me. Liquidity sweep, right? And even another liquidity sweep. Now what do we see to the upside, right? Liquidity unassessed, 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 unassessed. So if I take this and I flip it upside down, picture that range that we just talked about back in February, back in January, right? Sweeping, 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 having all of these pieces of liquidity down here. Now, what do we say that is likely happens when we do get a range like that? So assessing where it's going to go next. This is all the liquidity that we can pretty much guarantee that we are going to get a sweep of. Now, what happens when we get here? Well, we think back to February 5th, right? We kind of closed below this and continued on. Now, what would that mean for Bitcoin? That would actually be positive price action again because this is flipped upside down. Now, let's say we find a bottom here on this March or May range that we're talking about, right? Well, that would be no different than, sweeping this liquidity, kind of coming back in here and pushing what would actually be lower because again, this is inverted. I say all this to say, going into this week, it's my idea because we already have assessed this liquidity down here that it's just more likely we at least get a push into this 68 to 71K area. And that is going to be kind of the deciding factor of where we are going to go next. Again, so we talked about the liquidity sweeps. We talked about our broader range. We showed multiple examples. We're focusing in on this June example here, how that's no different than the larger range itself. There has been a lot of liquidity, right, left unswept in here. So going into this week, expecting a move into the 68 to 72K level. And this is going to be the determining factor. This is what's going to tell us bottom or not, in my opinion. I do believe I talked about it last week. I have not been greedy. People that have asked me about, hey, what do you think about crypto? Should I be buying it? I told them all the same things. Do not be greedy, hoping, begging for downside while we're already within this deep discount, while we're already, even below discounted prices because we are getting some of these bullish divergences to show in. I showed all of my kind of statistics to back, this indicator that I have been working on and what those forward-looking returns have looked like in similar discounts, what simulated returns have looked like in similar discounts. And regardless of what happens here, whether we do go up here and have to go get that 50 to 55K area, or regardless of if we are able to flip this, right, purchasing any crypto in here, I do not think is a bad idea. Scaling in to this zone is not a bad idea. And if we do end up getting something down here, well, that's when you can kind of back the truck up and, essentially put all your chips on the table, start going a little bit heavier. I don't want to use the word all in, but going a little bit harder on your purchases. All right, so I'm just going to I think this is a little bit of a better way to visualize it. Throw these little boxes on here, and I'm just highlighting, where the liquidity sweeps were happening, where was the liquidity being assessed on Bitcoin, and then also again our bottom level, but again we are leaving levels along the way here, right? Leaving levels along the way here. which since then have been assessed. Flip this over one more time just to give you guys a clean visual here. Again, looks a little bit cleaner on the 4 hour, but regardless, it still holds true. And we'll go ahead and delete this so it matches and flip this back. And hopefully, you guys can see what I'm talking about here, right? So, kind of breaking things down mechanically, right? Things look very similar over on Ethereum as well. Ethereum actually doesn't have this clean of a sweep right in here. But if Bitcoin is going to lead the way, I do think Ethereum is going to follow, right? If let's say this was enough liquidity grabbed for Bitcoin, and we flip this level, I don't think Ethereum's going to go in for its sweep just because it already wasn't as clean as Bitcoin, if I'm making sense there. So yeah, do take a screenshot of this. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the little lesson about some of these ranges that I'm talking about. And then key levels again, 68 to 71-ish area. Seeing how we react in there. Now I do want to make something clear too. This is stuff that I've been talking about on private clients for a while now. But I think we're at a bit of a critical point where I do need to just get this out there to everybody. I think it's important for everybody to know. But I did mention to them today, if we do, let me show you guys what I mean. Actually, I'll say that for another video. I'll say that for another video. But just know if we do, let's say we just get a nice clean breakthrough, please do not be FOMOing into really anything in here. There's some other stuff that I could show you within this June range that would point, right, similar pattern to getting some sort of back test. So my kind of strategy is I will gladly, take and buy anything anywhere in here, continue to scale in, saving a little bit of funds to really go hard if we do get that rejection here and move lower. But if you're somebody who's like, nah, I gotta wait for a little bit more confirmation, I gotta wait for this, just protect yourself a little bit. Have the understanding that if things do really get crazy in here, even if they don't get all too crazy, right? Maybe they go to 74 or something like that, a back test, little pullback after that is extremely likely in my opinion. There's also some stuff going on with Iran right now. I don't think it changes the macro picture. I've never been one to, give any substance to news and news cycles, especially with the recent administration that we have had the last couple of years. But that should give you some reassurance that, this isn't going to be some clean move, up to 100K. There's likely going to be some turbulence along the way. All right, a little bit of a macro overview as well. And we can actually use our same thing that we talked about today. I'll go ahead and box. I just don't feel like drawing like 12 different lines. But each one of these lows, that's liquidity being assessed. And this all up in here is liquidity, left unswept. What ends up happening? We end up breaking through it. Right? If I flip this over, again, I don't think that's any different than some of these ranges that we've also mentioned in today's video. This is a 3-day time frame, but that kind of stood out to me as well, and I just wanted to mention it. But 3-day Bitcoin price action as of late, momentum is curling, starting to see our adaptive momentum indicator also increasing as well. Obviously, added bonus of moving out of these oversold levels. Same thing we talked about last week, right? With divergences showing up, really good to see. Bitcoin just kind of in bit of a no man's land right now, but it doesn't mean you can't take advantage with scaling in and then just preparing for the stuff that I talked about. So hopefully this frames up where I think we're going, where I think Bitcoin is going. I guess I can talk about this too, a little bit of a weekly time frame. Nothing has changed on my macro viewpoint. I know I haven't talked about it maybe per se in a little bit, and I've had a couple people comment like, do you still have the same macro outlook? And absolutely yes. I think when we do flip this level, right, we are able to get through this level, right, back test, all-time highs for Bitcoin, alt season. I will talk about alt season in another video this week. We're not going to dive too heavy into it. Kind of want to just remain focused on exactly what's going on right now. My opinion on what's going on right now. But just know, like, I am working on that stuff. I am researching that stuff. I'm still following that stuff. I personally have been adding altcoins on this move. Back in here, when we talk about Bitcoin, cycle lows, things like that. Was I buying altcoins in here? Not particularly, and not very heavy on the altcoins that I did buy. So for me, it was mainly Bitcoin. Second biggest purchase was second biggest purchase was Ethereum. Third biggest purchase was XRP. Fourth biggest purchase was Solana. And I pretty much just left it at that for these cycle lows because of how these things work, right? Bitcoin typically gains strength first when we talk about a normal cycle bottom. So for somebody that did the right thing in here, didn't go super crazy heavy into altcoins, same thing back in the 2018 cycle, for me to be saying that, hey, this is a cycle bottom, or the mainstream is calling it a cycle bottom or looking for a cycle bottom. Altcoins are not even on those people's radar. They're talking about when's the bear market going to end, when's this, when's that. But no, I still hold full faith. I think the data supports it. It's not even faith. It's just what the data is telling me. That when we are able to flip this level, whether it's here, whether it's cleaner, and we just get through, expecting what comes next to be irrational exuberance, the final blow off top, the final peak that we missed in the 2022-2025 cycle. Again, it's all the same cycle to me, and we'll talk more about that along the way. My hardcore people, my people that have stuck around for a while, my people that are in the Discord, they already know what I'm talking about. But yeah, let's go ahead and wrap it up here. Pretty focused in, pretty dialed in. Everything is really chill right now. I think it's pretty straightforward. There's not a lot of noise in the market, as in, people are not, there's no benefit for people posting about crypto right now unless they really do believe in it and have a higher understanding of how these cycles work, how the crypto market works, and actually have some good analysis about the market. Those are the people sticking around right now. So I've had a lot of people kind of ask me like, oh, it seems like the mainstream, or like a lot of people are looking for some sort of cycle bottom or this or that. Does this have any effect on, if the masses are thinking it versus not? And I don't think the masses are even looking at crypto. So that's really the better place to be, right? We can argue, the people still sticking around can argue bear, bull, whatever have you, but I don't think without, you know, actual people even paying attention to crypto that the sentiment side of the trade really is as much of a factor, or something that I'm looking at all too much. But yeah, hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. We went on a little bit long. I said I was going to talk about Ethereum as well, but the same thing applies over there on Ethereum. Wish I got to break down some of the 3-day, 5-day, weekly, and 2-week charts a little bit better, but I don't want to take up too much of y'all's time, and I do hope you guys found this video useful and enjoyable. If you guys haven't seen it on the bottom, you guys can find me over there on Substack. I'm working on a new webpage. Probably wouldn't go to that right now, but that's gonna have this new product that I've been working on. So that's gonna be really big for you guys, and it actually applies to things outside of crypto as well. Applies to stocks and commodities over there. So I think that'll be fun. I will let you guys know when that's ready. And do have a Substack. You guys can check me out on there. Check me out on X. Make sure you join the free Discord. Hit me up with any questions, guys. I do this for you guys. I'm here for you. And let's run it up, baby. My bags are packed. See you on the next one. Peace.